Hey everybody, it's me, Root Beer's Hands, and the new Lyrical set came out, which means it's time to do another box opening while just kind of yapping about my impressions of this set. As always, I have my emotional support Bochis in playmat form, and then I couldn't find the other Bochi acrylic that I usually get, so this time the emotional support is Toa-sama. The new lyrical set, the first one for Divine Z, is building upon the units from Lyrical Set 3, so we're getting all the dress-up versions for, like, Kyoka, Michu, Hazaret, etc. And generally, I'm pretty happy with this set. I thought most of the dress-up forms did a pretty good job of, like, advancing all of them in a decently meaningful way, kind of keeping the flavor while also generally increasing the power of them. Unlike other dress-ups from the previous units, they have taken some more unique routes with the newer ones. So, let us get into it, and we can discuss as we kind of go on. So, the two decks that are kind of the big meta contenders coming out of this set are going to be Kyoka and Michu. So, if you've been following us on Twitter and you saw the little short that I put up, oh, wow, silver rare in our first box. Interesting. So this one is for Mediel support. I kind of forced that one onto Atlas because Mediel kind of had the playstyle of the V version of Great Nature. But as I was saying, Michu kind of already talked about it a little bit because if you've been watching some of the other posts that I've done on Twitter and here on this YouTube channel, then you know that I just pulled a second LSR version. Like, I pulled one from set 3 when I did the sneak peeks, and then I pulled a second one for the new one when I did sneak peeks for this set. And so that one's kind of the, like, top tier meta contender, I would say, if you look at the Japanese results. It is the one that tops most consistently. And then Kyoka is kind of the other one that's made its way into the meta. Personally, I prefer Kyoka. I think, like, the way that Michu works out is just, like, a style of deck that I'm not super fond of. So this one's a piece of Ballista support that kind of goes with more gems. And then this is the generic, like, boost double R that they got, that the other nations got in, what's it called? Set 3, but that didn't have Lyrical in it, so they forced it into this set. But yeah, Michu, not like a style of deck that I love. Part of it is just like, because Michu kind of takes after the Glitters, where she's more of a cross ride than like a straight up new form, then it kind of takes up a lot of deck space where you're playing Michu and then you're playing like the Searcher for Michu. So a piece of Hazaret support and a piece of Lilfa support. So Hazaret, I'm quite fond of. I was coping on it a lot in 2022, back when Lyrical 3 came out. I think I brought it to BCS, actually, and scrubbed out pretty hard. I thought the new Hazaret was actually quite good. I think a lot of people underrate it, maybe. I think it does have its problems, like the gimmick of, like, using lower-powered units doesn't matter too much because Hazaret kind of gives you the power back, but then because everything is kind of built around the low-powered units, like, you need to play some critical mass of them, and there just aren't enough, like, good low-statted cards for Hazaret to kind of take advantage of, especially because she only gives plus 5k, and the fact that the new one is built around giving something a back row attack means that you can't rely on Persona Ride to kind of help buff up your power a bit. I believe this one is a generic card, so this one lets you search for your Regalis pieces. And, so you look at top 5 for an order without Regalis piece, and then if you didn't reveal anything, you can countercharge 1. And then we have the new Kyoka, so like I was saying, I like this one. Similar to Hazaret, it gives you a consistent extra attack by giving you a back row attack. It only works on Kyoka names, however, just kind of the nature of the deck means that, like, you can call a copy of, Kyoka behind Kyoka in the back row center, and then if you're playing something like Franquette, you're probably going to have enough different names to trigger Franquette, so you can just bounce it back, and then because the magazine order gives you 10,000 power, you can give that to the back row Kyoka. It's going to get plus 5 from Kyoka's own ability too, so it becomes 28, and that kind of hits like a good number for getting over a defensive trigger. Combine that with the existing grade 2, I think it was Arche, that was like Counterblast, Soul Blast to stand it when your Vanguard attacks, and that one's not grade locked. I believe the back row attack is, but you have like 5, 6 attacks, but consistently 4 now, which is really cool. So I really do like the new Kyoka. I would try to play it at BCS, but unfortunately it was in the box that I accidentally left at the store, and I still haven't gotten it back yet. So, let's see. Next up, they're also reprinting the effect triggers, so these versions are all nice and shiny. I believe this is now my 4th one to replace the playset of triggers that's in the box that I don't have. Yay. So, other than Kyoka, like, I thought Hazoret was cool, I really liked it. I do think it's a little underrated. The deck definitely has its problems, like, because the drawback is random, you can't really control, like, what your hand is going to ultimately look like. You also have to, like, replace the cards that go to the bottom of the deck, so it's not like you're truly plussing. Like, if you guard with those cards, you probably have less things to call back. Although, Hazoret has a funny interaction with, Yuika, where because the bottom decking part is not like a cost, you can bottom deck, or you can bounce it back to your hand, still trigger the effect to draw, but then you get to like keep the card. This one is support for Fennel. Not a deck that I was super into. I remember there was a point where people were coping on Fennel being like rogue playable. It had some tops, and then eventually people just kind of fell off of that one. I think the deck is fine. It's kind of similar to Zorgo, where it's a 3-attack deck, but it leverages having huge numbers with crits and being able to just like rush early. So this is Kairi support. And, speaking of Michu, we have the new Michu. So, I already finished my Michu deck. I'm actually not pulling a ton of cards I need. I actually need the generic Triple R that just, like, soul charges, because I'm still trying to finish out Hazoret stuff. But yeah, like I was saying with the new Michu, it is a very strong deck, right? Like, because of the bind ability, where if you ride on top of the old Michu, you can bind it to retire a rear guard, combined with the order that lets you stun a unit, you have pretty good board control to kind of stave off your opponent's pressure. And then the on-place ability, if you place on the old Michu, lets you search out either a Cannonball or Nokuno, so that kind of gives you more consistent pressure. And the new version of Nokuno that comes in this set performs rearguard drive checks, so you get like 4 drive checks. Your numbers are generally like pretty big because your Cannonball ability, if you use the order, gives 3 things 10k. You can like restand your Vanguard, sort of. It like column swaps with the grade 1 Nokuno. So you're doing like 4 drive checks. You have okay card advantage. The thing I don't love about it is because you have to play like the grade 1 that lets you rewrite. I swear I have pulled so many copies of this card. Because you have to play the grade 1 that like re-rides your Vanguard. Which pile did I put that in? This one. So, because you're running like 4 of that to be able to kind of find Michus consistently, like on the one hand, it's basically 4 additional copies of your Persona ride, but on the other hand, it is using up a lot of deck space. It means like you don't have a ton of flexibility to play things like the cycle cards, which I'm not a huge fan of. That, and, because you're having to play like 7, 8 orders. So, which is why I'm not a huge fan of Michu. I feel like the deck maybe struggles a bit early, but that could also just be the fact that I'm not well practiced with the deck. I actually took it to Shop Challenge today, which is where I also bought this box, and I went 2-2. I think one of the games which I lost, which was against Shiranui, I think that one was winnable if I had made a few different decisions. I opted to go first for some stupid reason. I just didn't, like, stop to inquire if they had a G-Zone, and, I also didn't feel... I wasn't sure if I just want to, like, blind second Michu, That is one of the things where, if I had the rest of my lyrical stuff, I'd probably play Kyoka, because I think I'm more comfortable with that deck. But as it stands, Michu was the one that was easiest to build from scratch, that's still vaguely competitive. And I do want to try and do well with it, but yeah, I'm just not super comfortable with Michu. Oh, piece of magazine support. So this is a decent card. This is a way to help you find more magazines. Because it puts itself into Soul, it can kind of get out of the way. So you can, like, call it behind the Vanguard, put into Soul, search out for a magazine, and then you can maybe leverage that magazine into more advantage and pressure. You know, sometimes you just, like, don't have enough orders in your hand. That is another thing with these, like, order-heavy strategies. So, yeah. Oh, and also, haven't really talked about yet, but, like, Absolute Zero slash Judge Maidens is the, like, new archetype. You know, the boss unit is the cover card for this set. That one has an interesting, like, sort of Hanali type of thing, where if it's the fourth battle or more of the turn, I think, you have to, like, discard a card. And, like, that's not terrible, especially because it also does affect the Vanguard. So you can, like, kind of force your opponent to, like, drop their defensive cards, or maybe consider, like, putting on less pressure. I think the problem is that, like, in general, Standard has not quite gotten to the point where decks can make that many insane number of attacks that you're really decimating their hand. Like, most decks only make 4 or 5 attacks to begin with, so it's like, okay, they maybe drop the one card. That may or may not be enough to, like, get you additional pressure, or that may or may not stop their defensive abilities enough for you to pressure them for the win, but also, like, the deck isn't amazing at making pressure to begin with. It only makes 4 attacks itself, and the way it makes a 4th attack is a bit awkward. It requires you not to have a copy of the thing that calls back from the drop zone, so I don't know. The deck just, like, isn't quite there yet. Oh, right. And then, in terms of encounter archetypes, we have Coral and Prism. Prism is going to be a video at some point. I can't believe they massacred my babies like that. Coral, on the other hand, looks pretty decent, right? Like, it gets pretty big. I believe you can give it an additional drive check. Yeah, so the grade 1 gives it triple drive, and I believe Coral already just gains a crit on its own, if I remember correctly. I have the grade 3 Coral somewhere from a sneak peek. Let's see if I can find it real quick. Should be in this pile here. Yeah. So the new Coral gets the ability to, like, stand one of your rear guards, and then it also can get 5k for every 2 cards with Coral in its name, and then if your opponent's Vanguard's grade 3 gains a crit, the grade 1 version of Coral gives it an extra drive, so, you know, you make Coral really big, you have 4 attacks, extra drives, it's not a bad deck. You know, I was never, like, super attached to Coral from back in the Bermuda days. Oh, speaking of, there's another Coral. But this is one of those decks where I'm not, like, gunning for it, but if I end up with it, I'll play it just because I do enjoy it. You know, I appreciate the nostalgia, but the thing I'm truly here for is, of course, Prism, my favorite archetype from back in the day. Unfortunately, Bushiroad has massacred my children. They just, like, treated them so badly. They don't... the new version of Vert is this weird, like... She has the ability to ride another copy of herself and gain a not Persona Ride, it doesn't count as actual Persona riding, but, like, it gets the effects of Persona Ride, so if your opponent's grade 3 or greater, your front row gets 10k and you draw a card, so you can, like, double Persona Ride, and it's like, I get it. The flavor of this is that they're trying to recreate the idea of a break ride. It just doesn't work out super well. It's inconsistent because it means if you want to get the maximum effect, you have to have 2 copies of Vert, one to Persona Ride, one to use the effect ride with, and it's just like, ugh. You know, I was, like, testing with it because I thought about maybe playing it at BCS, but one, I don't have my Franquettes because they're in the box that is currently still missing, and then, also, like, in the testing, I just found that, like, yeah, the inconsistency where I always need to have 2 copies of Vert in rotation just made the deck a little too inconsistent. I wish it just worked with Labrador instead, you know? I said this during the video about it when we did the set review, but it's really frustrating that we have just 2 Prism archetypes, and they just don't work together. They're like 2 separate decks. What is this? Astasys support. Unfortunately, that deck never caught me, even though I really do like bouncing as a mechanic, as you all know. But Astasys never really, like, caught me. Like, I don't hate the deck, it's just not my preference. Uh, let's see. Our other frame rare is the Hazoret card. Ooh. And then just some, like, random rares. I don't have a ton to say about Mediel. I think Mediel was the one I haven't talked about yet. Like I said, I mostly dumped that one onto Atlas. I believe the version of Mediel is just, like, Mediel, but better. Okay, cool. A second copy of this Triple R, which is something I actually needed. You know, it's not the most impressive card in the world. It's like Soul Charge 1, then you can Counterblast a draw, and then on attack, if you have a copy of your Grade 3 in Soul, then it gets Power plus 5,000. It's fine. It is useful for things like Vert and Hazoret, which are my pet decks coming out of this set, where those decks need a lot of souls, so this is good for that. But yeah, Mediel is something I'm gonna kind of just leave to Atlas. I will slowly but surely just harass him with those cards. Maybe I'll just order them off of TCG Player and just, like, deliver them to his door one of these days. And then, I think we haven't talked about Lilfa yet. Lilfa was a mess of a deck in the original one. Because the way it worked, you needed to have a full board at all times, made you super susceptible to board control. It meant that even though the deck does have a lot of things that let you draw cards, you never truly plussed in it because you're always having to commit more than you draw, especially if your opponent does have that removal. And if you couldn't get a full board, then the deck just didn't do anything. So the new Lilfa, I believe, does not have to bounce the full board anymore. I think you needed to bounce 3 things still, but you could still get to a place where you have, like, a bare minimum board that's like your Vanguard, 2 rear guards. You know, you bounce them back, and then you call back a new column. Like, that's a lot easier than the old Lilfa, and then it also gives your Lilfa names extra shield value, so you have some incentive to run the old one, but then also, if you can afford to drop a Persona ride, you can just, like, use that. So yeah, I haven't had a ton of time to think about a build for Lilfa yet. It was one of those where, like, I wanted to like it because I like bouncing as a mechanic, but you know, the old Lilfa was just too weak for me to want to actually invest time into it. So I think the new one should be decent enough. We'll see how much it comes out price-wise. It might be a decent budget deck just to kind of continue that little series if you watch those streams. But for now, I think that is everything I had to say about this new Lyrical set. Generally pretty good. Had a couple of additions to the meta, and I think a couple of, like, if not rogue decks, then at least, like, locals tier decks. You know, those decks where it's like, yeah, if you take it to a locals, it's probably, like, strong enough to do well if it's a more casual day. Even, like, slightly competitive locals, you'll probably do well with something like Coral. And then, you know, things like Michu and Kyoka are strong enough to actually be meta contenders in, like, a bigger tournament. But for now, that is going to be it for this video. Thanks for watching, everybody. Bye-bye.